The general had seen everything: wars, medals, heroes, liars, but he'd never seen that number. 3,200 meters. Confirmed kill. His hand froze mid-step. The armory went silent. Every officer in the room felt it. The shift from routine inspection to something else entirely. Because that distance didn't exist in the record books. Couldn't exist. Not for a human being with a rifle and gravity working against every breath. And yet there it was. Pinned to the sleeve of a soldier no one had bothered to notice. Until now. If you're ready to see how the impossible became real, stay with me until the very end. Like this video and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The air inside Ironcliff Base's main armory tasted like gun oil and steel dust. It was 0600 hours, and the fluorescent lights overhead buzzed in their fixtures, casting everything in that cold, institutional white that made shadows look sharper than they should. Rows of weapon racks lined the walls: M4s, M240S, grenade launchers, anti-material rifles locked behind reinforced glass. Everything had its place. Everything had a purpose, and everything was about to be inspected. General Richard Hale moved through the space like a man who'd forgotten what it felt like to be impressed. 4 stars on his shoulder, 32 years of service. He'd walked through armories in Kandahar, Ramadi, Seoul, and a dozen places that didn't have names on any map. He knew what discipline looked like. He knew what laziness looked like. And he knew, without fail, when someone was trying to hide something. His aide, Captain Morris, trailed 2 steps behind, tablet in hand, marking off checklist items with mechanical efficiency. Morris was young, competent, forgettable. Exactly the kind of officer who made the machine run but never questioned why. "Inventory's clean, sir," Morris said quietly. "No discrepancies since last month." Hale didn't respond. He was already scanning the rows, eyes moving with the precision of a man trained to spot the crack in the armor, the loose bolt, the one thing that didn't belong. The enlisted personnel stood at attention near their stations. Most of them were armory techs, specialists who knew more about ballistics than most infantry officers ever would. They kept their eyes forward, shoulders square, breathing controlled. Standard. Hale walked past the first row without comment, past the second. His boots echoed on the concrete, each step measured, deliberate. Then he saw her. She was in the far corner near the heavy weapons section, kneeling beside a disassembled Barrett M82A1, a .50 caliber anti-material rifle that weighed 30 pounds and could punch through engine blocks at a mile. The kind of weapon that made enemy armor nervous and friendly shoulders ache. She worked quietly, methodically. Her hands moved with the kind of certainty that only came from repetition. Bolt carrier group, barrel, recoil spring. Each piece laid out on a clean mat in perfect order, no wasted motion, no hesitation. Hale barely glanced at her. Just another tech doing maintenance. Nothing unusual. He kept walking. But something nagged at him. A flicker at the edge of his awareness. The way a shadow moves wrong, or a sound doesn't quite match the environment. He stopped. Turned back. The soldier was still kneeling, now reassembling the rifle's lower receiver with a torque wrench. Her expression neutral, focused. She wore standard issue AC US, hair pulled back in a tight bun. No makeup, no jewelry. Regulation. Unremarkable, except for the badge. It was pinned just below her unit patch, small and unassuming. Most people wouldn't have noticed it. Most people wouldn't have known what it meant. Hale noticed. He stepped closer, eyes narrowing. The badge was matte black with a single engraved line of text, 3,200 meters / confirmed. For 3 full seconds, Hale didn't breathe. He read it again. Then a third time, as if the numbers might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. 3,200 meters. That was 2 miles. Just under. The longest confirmed sniper kill in modern military history, according to every database Hale had access to, was 3,540 meters. A Canadian Special Forces operator. 2017. Iraq. It took a team of spotters, perfect conditions, and a shot that analysts still debated as part skill, part miracle. And this soldier, the staff sergeant, had a badge claiming a shot within 340 meters of that record. Hale's jaw tightened. "Soldier!" His voice cut through the room like a blade. The woman looked up. Her eyes were gray, calm. She didn't flinch, didn't straighten to attention, just met his gaze with the kind of stillness that felt deliberate. "Sir," she said. No inflection, no nervousness. Hale pointed at the badge. Explain that. She glanced down at her sleeve, then back up at him. It's a marksmanship achievement badge, sir. Awarded for confirmed long-range engagement. I know what it is, Hale said, voice low and edged. I'm asking how you have it. The room had gone silent. Every tech, every officer within earshot was now watching. Morris stood frozen, tablet still raised, stylus hovering over the screen. The woman set down her torque wrench, resting it carefully on the mat. I earned it, sir. Hale felt his pulse kick up, not from anger, from disbelief. That distance isn't in the training manual. It's not in the doctrine. It's barely in the realm of physics. Respectfully, sir, she said, voice steady, it's in the record. Whose record? Mine. Silence. Hale stared at her. She stared back. No challenge in her expression, no pride. Just fact. Morris cleared his throat. Sir, should I... Pull her file, Hale said, not looking away from the soldier. Now. Morris's fingers moved across the tablet. A few seconds passed. Then his face went pale. Sir, it's restricted. Hale turned sharply. What? Her service record. I can access the basics, but most of it's flagged, redacted. I'd need higher clearance. Hale's eyes narrowed. He turned back to the soldier. What's your name? Staff Sergeant Mara Knox, sir. How long have you been at Ironcliff, Knox? 8 months, sir. And before that? A pause. Not long, just enough to be noticeable. Deployment rotation, sir. Details are classified. Hale felt the air shift. It was subtle, like the moment before a storm when the wind stops and everything goes still. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I've been in this uniform longer than you've been alive. I've read files on Delta operators, DevGru shooters, and Tier 1 assets that most colonels don't even know exist, and not one of them had a badge like that. Mara didn't blink. Then maybe you haven't read the right files, sir. The room might as well have been vacuum sealed. Morris made a sound, half cough, half gasp. One of the other techs shifted weight, boots scuffing concrete. Hale held her gaze for 5 more seconds. Then he straightened, turned on his heel, and walked toward the exit. Morris, conference room, 10 minutes. Yes, sir. As Hale pushed through the armory doors, the sunlight hit him like a slap. He stood on the top step, breathing in the cold morning air, trying to shake the feeling crawling up his spine. Impossible. That's what the badge was. Impossible. But Mara Knox hadn't looked like someone lying. She'd looked like someone stating a fact. And that was worse. 10 minutes later, Hale sat alone in conference room C, staring at a tablet screen that refused to cooperate. Morris had pulled everything he could access on Staff Sergeant Mara Knox. It wasn't much. Name, Knox, Mara J. Rank, E6, Staff Sergeant, MOS, 11B, Infantryman, / additional skill identifier, B4, Sniper. Current assignment, Ironcliff Base, Armory Operations. Previous assignments, redacted. Deployments, redacted. Commendations, redacted. The only concrete details were basic. Age, 29. Hometown, Billings, Montana. Enlistment date, 11 years prior. Everything else, everything that mattered, was locked behind security walls that required authorization Hale didn't have. Which made no sense. He was a 4-star general. There were maybe a dozen people in the entire military structure with higher clearance. And yet, here he was, staring at a file that treated him like a civilian. Morris stood near the door, clearly uncomfortable. Sir, I've requested access escalation, but it'll take... How long? Could be hours, could be days, depends on who's reviewing it. Hale set the tablet down. Tell me what you can see. Morris hesitated, then scrolled through the limited data. She enlisted at 18, completed basic at Fort Benning, top of her class, selected for advanced infantry training. Then, it gets murky. There's a 6-month gap where she's listed as in training, but no location, no details. Sniper school? Probably, but it's not in the standard pipeline. Whatever she did, it wasn't Fort Benning's course. Hale leaned back in his chair. What about her shooting scores? Morris tapped the screen. That part's unusual. Define unusual. Her rifle qualification scores are listed as exempt. Exempt. Yes, sir. Not failed, not passed, just exempt, like the test didn't apply to her. Hale felt his jaw tighten. Keep going. After the training DAP, she shows up in a unit designation I don't recognize. Task Force Mongoose. No base listed. No chain of command. Just the name. Mongoose, Hale repeated. He'd heard the name before, years ago. A briefing about asymmetric operations in the Hindu Kush, off-the-books teams that handled situations too sensitive for conventional units. He'd assumed it was rumor. Morse continued. She was with them for 4 years, then reassigned here. No explanation, no transition notes, just dropped into armory duty like she's rotating off a desk job. Hale stood, pacing toward the window. Outside, the base was waking up. PT formations jogging past, vehicles moving toward the motor pool. Normal, routine. Except nothing about Mara Knox was routine. Pull the logs from the range, Hale said. I want to see her shooting records. Live fire, training, anything. Morris nodded and left. Hale stayed at the window, watching the sun climb higher, thinking about the way Mara had looked at him. No fear, no pride, just certainty. Like someone who'd already proven herself and didn't need to do it again. Odd. By 1400 hours, Hale had what he needed. The range logs were sparse. Mara Knox rarely used the training facilities. When she did, her targets were always at extreme distances. 800 meters, 1,000, 1,200, and every single shot was recorded as a hit. Not on target, not effective, just hit, center mass, every time. Hale sat in his office, reading through the data, feeling the weight of it settle into his chest. There was a knock at the door. Come. Morris entered, followed by another officer Hale didn't recognize. Older, quiet. The kind of man who looked like he'd been pulled from retirement. Sir, Morris said, this is Colonel Greer. He's from JSOC. He requested a meeting. Hale stood. Colonel? Greer nodded. General, I understand you've taken an interest in one of my former operators. Hale's eyes sharpened. Your operator? Was, Greer corrected. She's on loan to Ironcliff now. Officially listed as Armory Support. Unofficially, she's on standby. For what? Greer smiled faintly. For when we need someone who can do what no one else can. Hale crossed his arms. That badge, the 3,200-meter shot, is it real? Greer's smile faded. It's real. How? That, Greer said slowly, is classified. But I can tell you this, Mara Knox is the most precise long-range shooter I've ever worked with. Maybe the best alive. And if you're thinking about pulling her into some kind of demonstration or publicity stunt, I'd advise against it. Why? Because she doesn't perform for crowds. She performs when lives are on the line. And if you push her into the spotlight, you'll lose the one asset that works because no one's looking at her. Hale felt the words land like stones. She's wasted in an armory. Is she? Greer tilted his head. Or is she exactly where she needs to be until the world needs her again? Silence. Greer moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing, General. The shot that earned her that badge? It wasn't a training exercise. It was a live op. High-value target, hostages involved, no air support, no backup plan, just her, a rifle, and 4 hours to calculate a shot that shouldn't have been possible. Hale's breath caught. And? One shot, one kill, 32 hostages walked out alive. Greer left. Hale stood there, staring at the empty doorway, feeling something shift in his chest. Not doubt, not disbelief. Understanding. That evening, Hale returned to the armory. It was quieter now. Most of the techs had gone to chow. Only a few remained, finishing up maintenance logs, locking down equipment. Mara was still there. Same corner, same rifle, same methodical precision. Hale approached slowly, hands behind his back. She looked up when he was 10 feet away. General? Knox. He stopped a few feet from her workspace. I spoke with Colonel Greer. She didn't react, just nodded once. He told me about the shot. Another nod. Why didn't you say anything? Hale asked. When I questioned you this morning, you could have explained, could have defended yourself. Mara set down the cleaning rod she'd been using. Respectfully, sir, I didn't need to defend myself. The badge is real, the record is real. Whether you believed it or not didn't change that. Hale felt a flicker of something. Respect, maybe, or irritation. Hard to tell. Most soldiers would have jumped at the chance to prove themselves, he said. I'm not most soldiers. No, Hale agreed quietly. You're not. He watched her work for a moment. The rifle gleamed under the lights. Every surface clean, every component checked and rechecked. How do you do it? He asked. A shot like that? 2 miles. Wind, spin drift, Coriolis effect. How do you account for all of it? Mara looked up at him, and for the first time something shifted in her expression. Not a smile, not pride, just honesty. You don't rush, she said. You don't guess. You calculate, you wait, and when the moment comes, you trust the work you did before you pulled the trigger. Hale nodded slowly. And if you miss? Then someone dies who didn't have to. The weight of that statement hung in the air. Hale turned to leave, then stopped. Knox. Sir? Don't let them bury you in this armory. You're better than that. She tilted her head slightly. With respect, sir, I'm exactly where I need to be. Hale studied her for a long moment. Then he left. As the door closed behind him, Mara went back to her rifle. Steady, precise, invisible, just the way she liked it. 3 days later. The message came through official channels, but it felt wrong. Hale read it twice, then called Morris into his office. Sir? Knox is being pulled for a live demonstration, Hale said, voice tight. Some VIP tour group wants to see elite marksmanship capabilities. They want her on the range tomorrow at 0900. Morris frowned. That's unusual. It's idiotic, Hale snapped. She's not a circus act. Do you want me to push back? Hale considered it, then shook his head. No. Let it happen. Morris blinked. Sir? If they want to see what she can do, let them see it. Maybe then they'll understand why we don't parade her around like a trophy. Morris left, still looking confused. Hale leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. He had a feeling tomorrow was going to be interesting. The next morning. Ironcliff's extended range facility stretched 3 miles into the desert. Flags marked every 100 meters. Berms rose and fell like frozen waves. At the far end, barely visible even with optics, sat a series of steel targets, human-shaped silhouettes designed to simulate real engagement scenarios. The VIP group arrived at 0845. Congressmen, defense contractors, a few journalists with cameras. They clustered behind the observation platform, talking in low voices, sipping coffee from thermoses. Hale stood off to the side, arms crossed, watching. Mara arrived at 0855, carrying her rifle case. She wore her standard ACUS, hair pulled back, expression neutral. No fanfare, no acknowledgement of the crowd. She set the case down, opened it, and began assembling her rifle with the same calm efficiency Hale had seen in the armory. One of the congressmen leaned toward Hale. Is she the one? She is. She doesn't look like much. Hale didn't respond. The range officer, a master sergeant with 30 years of experience, stepped forward. Sergeant Knox, you're cleared for demonstration fire. Targets at 800, 1,000, and 1,200 meters. Wind is 3 knots northwest. Barometric pressure stable. You have the range. Mara nodded. Understood. She moved to the shooting platform, settled into a prone position, and adjusted her scope. The rifle looked massive against her frame, but she handled it like it weighed nothing. Hale watched her breathing slow. Watched her stillness spread through her body like ice. Minutes passed. The VIPs shifted, uncomfortable. One of them whispered something. Another checked his watch. Then, boom! The rifle's report cracked through the valley like thunder. The recoil kicked dirt into the air. Mara absorbed it, didn't move. Stand by, the range officer said, binoculars raised. 3 seconds. Impact, 800 meters, center mass. Polite applause from the VIPs. One of the contractors nodded approvingly. Hale didn't react. Mara cycled the bolt, chambered another round, and settled back into position. Another minute of stillness. Boom. Impact, 1,000 meters, center mass. More applause. A few impressed murmurs. Mara didn't acknowledge them. She was already adjusting her scope, recalculating, breathing in rhythm with the wind. This time, she waited longer. 5 minutes. The VIPs started to fidget. One of the journalists whispered to his cameraman. Hale's jaw tightened. Wait for it. Boom! The shot felt different, louder, heavier. The valley swallowed the sound. Everyone leaned forward. The range officer raised his binoculars, frowned, adjusted the focus. Then his voice came through, flat and disbelieving. Impact, 1,200 meters, dead center, within 2 inches of the kill zone. Silence. Then someone started clapping. Others joined in, hesitant at first, then louder. Mara stood, ejected the spent casing, and began breaking down her rifle. One of the congressmen approached Hale. That was impressive, General. Truly. But I thought we'd see something closer to her record. The 3,200-meter shot. Hale turned to him, expression hard. You just did. I'm sorry? She fired at 1,200 meters because that's what the range allows. But the precision, the consistency, the patience, the control, that's the same at any distance. You want to see 3,200? Build me a range that long and give her a target that matters. The congressman blinked. I see. Hale walked away, leaving the VIPs behind. He found Mara near the equipment shed, securing her rifle case. Knox. She looked up. Sir, how do you feel about that? About what, sir? Being put on display like that. She shrugged. It's part of the job sometimes. It shouldn't be. Mara met his eyes. Respectfully, sir. I didn't mind. They needed to see what discipline looks like. Now they have. Hale studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Dismissed. She turned and walked toward the motor pool, rifle case slung over her shoulder, moving with the same quiet precision that defined everything she did. Hale watched her go, and for the first time in a long time, he felt something close to hope. Because the world was full of noise, full of people who demanded attention, who needed validation, who craved the spotlight. But Mara Knox? She didn't need any of that. She just needed a rifle, a target, and a reason. And when that moment came, when the impossible became necessary, she'd be ready, quiet, precise, invisible, until it mattered. Later that night, Hale sat in his quarters, reading through the after-action reports from the demonstration. The VIPs had been impressed. The contractors wanted more data. The journalists were already drafting articles about the sniper you've never heard of. He closed the file and stared at the wall. Somewhere on this base, Mara Knox was probably cleaning her rifle. Again. The same way she did every night, slow, methodical, exact. And tomorrow, she'd do it again. And the day after that. Until the call came. Hale leaned back in his chair, eyes drifting to the window. Outside, the base lights flickered against the darkness. And somewhere in that darkness, a soldier no one noticed was holding the line. Because some people don't need to be seen to change the world. They just need to be ready when the world needs them. The summons came 3 weeks later, and it didn't come through official channels. Hale was in his office, reviewing supply requisitions, when his secure line rang. Not the desk phone. The black one. The one that only rang when something had gone sideways in a way that required his direct attention. He picked up on the second ring. Hale. The voice on the other end was clipped, formal, unfamiliar. General, this is Major Vance, JSOC Operations. We have a situation developing that requires your immediate attention. Can you confirm secure status? Hale glanced at his office door. Closed, locked. Confirmed. What's the situation? We need Staff Sergeant Knox, now. Hale felt his pulse kick. Explain. There's a developing hostage situation. Embassy personnel. High-value targets. The tactical window is closing. We need her skill set on site within 6 hours. Where? That's classified until she's read in. Can you release her? Hale's jaw tightened. She's not my asset to release. She's assigned to armory operations. General. Vance's voice hardened. We both know that's administrative cover. Colonel Greer flagged her as available for immediate recall. We're exercising that option. Now. Hale stood, moving toward the window. Outside, the base continued its rhythm. PT formations, vehicle maintenance, the machinery of routine. What's the threat profile? Armed militants, fortified position, civilians in immediate danger. Conventional assault carries unacceptable casualty risk. We need precision. We need distance. We need Knox. Hale closed his eyes. She's not a tool you pull off a shelf when it's convenient. No, sir. She's a specialist we activate when lives are on the line. And right now, 12 lives are on the line. So I'm asking again, can you release her? Silence stretched between them. Then Hale spoke, voice low. I'll send her to you. But Vance? Sir? You bring her back in one piece, or you answer to me personally. Understood, General. The line went dead. Hale stood there for a moment, staring at the phone, feeling the weight of what he'd just authorized settle into his chest. Then he grabbed his cover and headed for the door. He found Mara exactly where he expected, in the armory, cleaning her rifle. She looked up when he entered, reading his expression in the span of a heartbeat. Her hands stilled on the cleaning rod. Sir? Pack your gear, Hale said. Your wheel's up in 90 minutes. Mara didn't ask questions, didn't hesitate. She just nodded once and began securing her weapon with quick, practiced movements. Duration? Unknown. Could be days, could be hours. ROE. You'll be briefed en route. She stood, slinging her rifle case over one shoulder, grabbing her go-bag with the other hand. Her face remained neutral, but Hale caught something in her eyes. Not fear, not excitement. Focus. The kind that came when the stakes were real and the margin for error was zero. Knox. She stopped at the door, looking back. Hale wanted to say something, wanted to tell her to be careful, to come back safe, to remember that she was more than just a trigger pull. But the words didn't come, because Mara Knox didn't need reassurance. She needed trust. Make it count, he said instead. She held his gaze for 1 second. Then she was gone. Hale stood alone in the armory, listening to the echo of her boots fade down the corridor, and felt the silence close in around him like water. The briefing happened on a C-130 somewhere over the Atlantic. Mara sat in the cargo bay, surrounded by tactical maps, satellite imagery, and 3 officers who looked like they hadn't slept in days. Major Vance, lean, mid-40s, eyes like flint, led the briefing. Beside him sat Captain Reyes, a logistics officer with a tablet full of real-time intelligence feeds, and Lieutenant Samuels, a young forward observer who kept glancing at Mara like she was a myth come to life. Vance didn't waste time. 12 hours ago, the U.S. Embassy in Karzan was breached by an armed militant group calling themselves the Red Crescent Brigade. They've taken 16 hostages, including our ambassador, 2 CIA officers, and 11 local staff. He tapped the tablet, and an aerial view of the embassy compound appeared on the screen mounted to the cargo bay wall. The building sat on a hill overlooking the city, surrounded by high walls, guard towers, and a single access road that snaked up from the valley below. The militants are dug in, Vance continued. They've barricaded the main building, mined the access road, and positioned shooters in the guard towers. Any conventional assault will result in mass casualties. Theirs and ours. Mara studied the image, eyes tracing the angles, the sightlines, the dead zones. What's their demand? Release of 30 prisoners currently held in government custody. Deadline is 36 hours from now. After that, they start executing hostages. 1 every hour. Samuel shifted uncomfortably. We've tried negotiation. They're not interested. Mara's gaze didn't leave the screen. Air support? Ruled out, Vance said. Too much collateral risk. The hostages are scattered throughout the building. 1 bad strike and we lose them all. Ground assault? Same problem. The approach is a kill zone. We'd lose half our team before we reach the gate. Mara leaned forward, studying the terrain. So you need someone who can neutralize the leadership without triggering a bloodbath. Exactly. Vance's eyes locked onto hers. We've identified the commander, a man named Tariq al-Hazm, former military, smart, ruthless. He's coordinating everything from the embassy's secure conference room on the 3rd floor. If he goes down, the command structure collapses. His lieutenants will panic, and our QRF can move in during the confusion. Where's the conference room? Reyes pulled up another image, this one a floor plan. Northeast corner, 3rd floor, windows facing the valley. Mara's eyes traced the distance from the embassy to the surrounding ridgelines. Range? Vance's expression hardened. 2,800 meters, give or take. The cargo bay went silent, except for the drone of the engines. Samuels broke first. That's almost 2 miles. Mara didn't react. Yeah. She just kept studying the terrain, calculating wind patterns, elevation changes, thermal layers. What's the weather forecast? Reyes checked his tablet. Variable winds gusting up to 15 knots, temperature drop after sunset, humidity climbing. Time of engagement. Your call, Vance said, but the deadline is ticking. The longer we wait, the more volatile the situation becomes. Mara sat back, eyes still on the map. Her mind was already working through the variables: ballistics, atmospherics, human factors, 2,800 meters in variable wind, through urban thermals, with hostages' lives hanging in the balance. It was the kind of shot most snipers wouldn't even attempt. She looked up at Vance. I'll need a spotter, someone who knows the terrain. Samuels will be your forward observer. He's worked the region for 6 months. Mara glanced at the lieutenant. He looked young, too young, but his eyes were steady, and he didn't flinch under her gaze. That was something. Rules of engagement? She asked. Positive ID on Al-Hazm. Confirm he's isolated. 1 shot, clean kill, no room for error. Mara nodded slowly. And if I miss? Vance's face was stone. Then 16 people die, and we go home with body bags instead of heroes. The weight of that statement settled into the cargo bay like a physical presence. Mara stood, slinging her rifle case over her shoulder. When do we insert? Wheels down in 4 hours. You'll have until dawn to set up. First light is your window. She turned toward the rear of the aircraft, then stopped. Major? Yes? If this goes wrong, make sure they know it wasn't because I didn't try. Vance's expression softened just slightly. It won't go wrong, Sergeant. That's why you're here. Mara didn't respond. She just moved toward the rear of the plane, settling into a jump seat, closing her eyes. Samuels watched her, then leaned toward Reyes. Is she always this calm? Reyes didn't look up from his tablet. She's not calm, Lieutenant. She's working. The shot's already happening in her head. She's just waiting for reality to catch up. Done. They landed at a forward operating base just after midnight. The air was dry, tasted like dust and diesel. The FOB was small. 20 personnel, mostly logistics and intelligence. No one asked questions. No one made eye contact. They knew what Mara was here to do, and they knew better than to distract her. Samuels met her at the Humvee, carrying a pack loaded with spotting equipment, rangefinders, and communication gear. He looked nervous but focused. We've got a hide site prepped, he said as they climbed in. Ridgeline overlooking the valley. Good concealment. Clean sightline to the embassy. Mara nodded, checking her rifle for the 3rd time since landing. Everything was in order. Barrel clean. Optics zeroed. Ammunition loaded. 50 BMG, hand-selected rounds with consistent weight and powder charge. The drive took 40 minutes, winding through narrow roads and abandoned villages. The headlights cut through the darkness like knives, illuminating crumbling walls and empty windows. This was contested territory. Government forces controlled the roads, but the hills belonged to whoever was willing to die for them. They reached the insertion point just before 0200. Mara and Samuels dismounted, moving on foot through the rocky terrain, climbing steadily toward the ridgeline. The night was cold, silent, the kind of silence that pressed against your ears and made you hyper-aware of every breath, every footstep. They reached the hide site 40 minutes later, a shallow depression behind a rock outcropping, camouflaged with netting and natural vegetation. From here, the valley spread out below them like a map, and in the distance, lit by floodlights and surrounded by walls, sat the embassy. Mara settled into position, assembling her rifle with quiet efficiency. Samuel set up the spotting scope, adjusting the tripod, checking the angles. Range is 2,820 meters, he said quietly. Wind from the northwest, 8 to 12 knots. Barometric pressure 30.1 and dropping. Mara didn't respond. She was already looking through her scope, studying the embassy windows, searching for movement, for patterns, for the one piece of information that would make the impossible possible. Hours passed. The sky began to lighten, shifting from black to deep blue to gray. The city below stirred, distant sounds of traffic, voices, the call to prayer echoing from a nearby minaret. Samuels shifted beside her. How long do we wait? Until the shot presents itself, Mara said, voice barely above a whisper. And if it doesn't? Then we wait longer. Samuels fell silent. Mara's breathing slowed, her heartbeat steadied. She let the world narrow to the view through her scope, the embassy, the windows, the angles of light and shadow. At 0627, movement. 3rd floor, northeast corner. A figure stepped into view behind a window, backlit by interior lights. Tall, broad-shouldered, holding something. A phone, maybe, or a radio. Samuels leaned into his spotting scope. Possible target. Confirm identity. Mara adjusted her scope, increasing magnification. The figure turned, and for a moment she saw his face clearly. Dark beard, scar along the left cheek, eyes scanning the room with the kind of authority that came from command. "That's him," Samuels whispered. "That's Al-Hazm." Mara's pulse didn't change. She was already calculating. Wind speed, elevation, temperature. The bullet would drop nearly 30 feet over that distance. It would drift left in the crosswind. It would slow as it traveled, losing energy, losing stability. She had one chance. Samuels's voice came through, steady now. Wind holding at 10 knots, pressure stable, clear line of sight. Mara exhaled slowly, letting half her breath out, holding the rest. Her finger settled on the trigger, not pulling, just resting, waiting. Al-Hazm moved to the window, looking out over the valley. He was saying something to someone behind him, gesturing, explaining, confident, untouchable. He had no idea death was watching him from 2 miles away. Mara felt the moment arrive. Not a thought, not a decision, just recognition. The wind calmed, the light steadied. Everything aligned. She pulled the trigger, the rifle roared. Recoil slammed into her shoulder. The muzzle blast kicked dust into the air. The sound echoed across the valley, rolling like thunder. Samuels counted under his breath. 3, 4, 5. Through the scope, Mara watched. The bullet traveled at 2,800 feet per second, but over this distance, it felt like slow motion. The world held its breath. Then, the window shattered. Al-Hazm's head snapped back. His body dropped out of view. Samuels gasped. "Hit! Confirmed hit! Target down!" Mara cycled the bolt, chambering another round, but she didn't fire. She just watched, waiting. Inside the embassy, chaos erupted. Figures moved past the windows. Shouting echoed faintly across the valley. The command structure was collapsing, just like Vance had predicted. Samuels grabbed his radio. "Command, this is Overwatch. Target neutralized. Repeat, target neutralized. QRF is clear to advance." The response was immediate. "Copy Overwatch. QRF moving now. Stand by for confirmation." Mara lowered her rifle, exhaling fully for the first time in what felt like hours. Her hands were steady, her breathing controlled, but inside something unclenched, just slightly. Samuels looked at her, eyes wide. I've never seen anything like that." Mara didn't respond. She was already breaking down her rifle, packing her gear, preparing to move. Because the shot was just the beginning. Now they had to get out. The extraction was supposed to be clean. They moved down the ridgeline, retracing their route, aiming for the insertion point where the Humvee waited. The sun was rising now, painting the valley in shades of gold and amber. Beautiful, if you ignored the gunfire echoing from the embassy as the QRF breached the compound. Samuels led the way, checking his GPS, keeping them on course. Mara followed, rifle slung, eyes scanning the terrain for movement, for threats, for anything that didn't belong. They were halfway to the vehicle when Samuels stopped. "Contact," he whispered, dropping to one knee. Mara crouched beside him, following his gaze. 3 figures. Maybe 400 meters out, moving parallel to their position. Armed. Militia, probably. Local fighters attracted by the sound of the shot, coming to investigate. Samuels keyed his radio. "Command, we've got possible hostiles on our route. Request immediate extraction." Static. Then a voice. Tense. "Negative, Overwatch. QRF is engaged. All air assets committed. You're on your own for the next 30 minutes. Samuels cursed under his breath. Mara watched the figures move closer. They hadn't spotted them yet, but they would. The terrain offered limited cover, and the sun was climbing fast, eliminating shadows. "We can't wait," she said quietly. "What do you want to do?" Mara studied the angles, the distances, the timing. "We move fast, stay low. If they engage, we suppress and displace. And if they have support, then we improvise." Samuel swallowed hard, then nodded. "Lead the way." They moved, low and fast, using the rocks and scrub for cover, putting distance between themselves and the approaching fighters. Mara's breathing stayed controlled, her movements fluid. This wasn't her specialty. Close quarters evasion required different skills than long-range precision, but she'd been trained for it, drilled for it, and she'd survived worse. Behind them, voices called out, shouting. The fighters had spotted something, maybe their tracks, maybe movement. Either way, the clock was ticking. Mara and Samuels reached a shallow wadi, a dry riverbed carved into the landscape by ancient floods. They dropped into it, using the banks for cover, moving along its length toward the extraction point. Gunfire cracked behind them, rounds snapped overhead, kicking up dirt and stone. Samuels flinched, but kept moving. Mara didn't break stride. She counted the shots. A K-pattern rifles, 3 shooters, suppressive fire more than aimed. They were trying to pin them down, slow them down. "Keep moving," Mara shouted. They ran. The wadi curved ahead, offering temporary concealment. Mara risked a glance back. The fighters were closing, maybe 200 meters now, moving with the confidence of people who thought they had the advantage. They were wrong. Mara dropped to one knee, unslung her rifle, and brought it up in one smooth motion. Samuels kept running, then realized she'd stopped and turned back. "What are you—" "Get to the vehicle," Mara said, voice calm. "Call for immediate extract. I'll buy you time." "I'm not leaving you here." "That's an order, Lieutenant." Their eyes met. Samuels saw something there, not desperation, not fear, just certainty, the kind that came from someone who'd already decided how this ended. He hesitated one more second, then he ran. Mara turned back toward the fighters, 3 of them, moving fast, closing the distance. She settled into a firing position, breathing slowing, world narrowing. This wasn't a mile-long shot. This was fundamentals. Breath control. Trigger discipline. Follow-through. The first fighter crested the ridge. Mara fired. The .50 caliber round hit him center mass, the impact throwing him backward like he'd been struck by a truck. He didn't get back up. The other 2 dove for cover, shouting, firing blind. Mara cycled the bolt, chambered another round, waited. Seconds stretched. Then one of them broke cover, trying to flank. Mara tracked him through her scope, led him by half a body length, and fired. He dropped. The third fighter didn't move. Smart. He was pinned, and he knew it. Mara keyed her radio. "Samuels, status?" "At the vehicle. Extraction inbound. ET. Oh, 10 minutes." 10 minutes. Mara could hold for 10 minutes. She settled deeper into her position, rifle steady, eyes scanning for movement. The remaining fighters stayed hidden, occasionally firing a burst in her general direction, but the shots were wild, uncoordinated. Time crawled. 8 minutes. 6. Then she heard it, the distant thrum of rotor blades. The extraction bird coming in fast and low. Mara fired one more suppressive round toward the fighter's position, then stood and ran. She covered the distance to the extraction point in under 2 minutes, lungs burning, legs pumping. The Humvee was already moving, Samuels at the wheel, racing toward the landing zone. The helicopter touched down in a cloud of dust and noise. Mara threw herself inside, Samuels right behind her. The pilot didn't wait. He pulled pitch and climbed, banking hard away from the ridgeline. Through the open door, Mara saw the valley fall away, the embassy shrinking in the distance, smoke rising from multiple points in the compound. Samuels collapsed against the bulkhead, chest heaving. That was too close. Mara didn't respond. She was checking her rifle, running through the post-engagement checklist in her head. Weapon status. Ammunition count. Equipment accountability. Everything in order. The pilot's voice crackled through the headset. "Overwatch, this is Griffin 1. Hostages secure. All 16 accounted for. Mission success. Nice shooting." Mara closed her eyes. 16 lives. 1 shot. The math was simple. The weight was not. Samuels looked at her, something like awe in his expression. "How do you do it? Stay calm like that? I thought we were dead." Mara opened her eyes, staring out at the horizon. Fear doesn't change the outcome. Training does. Discipline does. The shot doesn't care if you're scared. It only cares if you're ready. Samuels nodded slowly, processing that. The helicopter banked toward the FOB, leaving the valley behind. And in the cargo bay, surrounded by the noise and vibration, Marnock sat in silence, already beginning the process of letting go. Of the shot. Of the fear. Of the moment. Because in 6 hours she'd be back at Ironcliff. Back in the armory. Back to being invisible. Just the way it was supposed to be. The debrief lasted 3 hours, and by the end of it, Mara wanted nothing more than silence. They'd landed at the FOB just after noon. the helicopter's rotors still spinning down when Major Vance pulled her into a tent that smelled like stale coffee and stress. Maps covered every surface. Intelligence officers clustered around monitors, tracking real-time feeds from the embassy. The hostages were safe, all 16 extracted without injury. Al-Hazm's body had been confirmed. The Red Crescent Brigade had scattered into the hills, leaderless and broken. Mission success. But Vance wanted details. Every variable, every calculation, every breath she'd taken before pulling that trigger. Mara gave him what he needed: wind speed, barometric pressure, holdover, lead time. The technical language of death delivered from 2 miles away. She spoke without emotion, without pride, just reciting facts the way someone might read from a maintenance manual. When it was over, Vance leaned back in his chair, studying her with an expression caught somewhere between respect and something else. Something heavier. "Sergeant," he said quietly, "what you did today, most snipers go their entire careers without taking a shot like that. You made it look routine." Mara didn't respond. Vance continued. "Command wants to recognize this, publicly. There's talk of a commendation, maybe more." "No." The word came out flat, final. Vance blinked. "Sergeant, respectfully, sir, no. I did my job. The hostages are safe. That's the only recognition that matters." Vance studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, but this stays in your file. When they write the history books, your name will be in them whether you like it or not." Mara stood, slinging her rifle case over her shoulder. "History can wait, sir. I'd like to go home." She was on a transport back to Ironcliff 6 hours later. She returned to base at 0400, slipping through the gates in the pre-dawn darkness like a ghost returning to haunt familiar ground. No fanfare, no welcome committee, just the MP at the gate checking her ID and waving her through with a nod. Mara drove straight to the armory. The building was empty, silent except for the hum of the ventilation system. She moved to her usual corner, set down her rifle case, and began the ritual she'd performed 1,000 times before. Disassembly, inspection, cleaning, every component examined, every surface wiped down, every potential failure point checked and rechecked. Her hands moved with automatic precision, but her mind drifted. 2,800 meters. One shot, 16 lives. The numbers meant something. They always did. But the weight of them, the knowledge that hesitation would have meant body bags instead of reunion videos, that weight never got lighter. It just became familiar. She was halfway through reassembling the bolt carrier group when she heard footsteps. General Hale appeared in the doorway, uniform wrinkled, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. He looked like he'd been awake for days. "Knox." She looked up but didn't stand. "Sir." Hale approached slowly, hands clasped behind his back. "I got the after-action report an hour ago. Vance said you pulled off something remarkable." Mara returned to her rifle. "I did what was necessary." That shot, 2,800 meters in variable wind. Vance said his spotters are still trying to figure out how you compensated for all the variables. "Math and patience, sir, same as any other shot." Hale stopped a few feet away, watching her work. "He also said you held off 3 hostiles during extraction, alone." "2, sir. The third stayed in cover." "2 then." Hale's voice carried a weight that made Mara pause. Most soldiers would consider that a career-defining moment. You've been back 4 hours and you're cleaning your rifle like it was a training exercise. Mara met his eyes. "Because that's what it was, sir. Training prepares you for the real thing. The real thing validates the training. It's a loop. You don't break it just because the stakes were high." Hale was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled up a stool and sat down across from her, an uncharacteristic move that made Mara's instincts sharpen. "Knox, I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer." "Sir?" "How long can you keep doing this?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Mara's hand stilled on the cleaning rod. "Doing what?" "This." Hale gestured around the armory. "Hiding in plain sight, waiting for the call, going from invisible to indispensable and back again. How long before it breaks you?" Mara's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. "Respectfully, sir, it won't break me. This is what I'm built for." "Everyone breaks eventually." "Then I haven't reached eventually yet." Hale leaned forward. I've seen your psych evals, the redacted ones. I had to call in 3 favors just to get a glimpse. You know what they said? Mara didn't answer. They said you have the highest stress tolerance they've ever measured, that you process trauma differently than most people, that you compartmentalize so effectively it borders on pathological. He paused. But they also said that kind of control comes with a cost, and sooner or later the bill comes due. Mara set down the cleaning rod, her movements deliberate, controlled. General, with respect, I appreciate your concern, but I'm fine. I've always been fine. And I'll continue to be fine as long as I'm allowed to do my job without being psychoanalyzed every time I come back from one. Hale studied her for a long moment. Then he stood, nodding slowly. All right, Sergeant, but if that changes, if you ever need to talk or need help or just need someone to listen, my door is open. Understood, sir. Hale turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing. Command is considering reassigning you. They think you're wasted in armory operations. Mara's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Where? Training cadre. Advanced sniper school. They want you teaching the next generation. For the first time since returning, Mara felt something close to anger flicker in her chest. I don't want to teach, sir. I know, that's why I told them no. Mara looked up, surprised. Hale's expression was unreadable. You're exactly where you need to be, Knox. Not because you're hiding, but because when the call comes, and it will come again, you need to be ready. And you can't be ready if you're stuck in a classroom explaining wind calculations to kids who'll never take a shot that matters. He left before she could respond. Mara sat alone in the armory, staring at the half-assembled rifle in front of her, feeling the weight of his words settle into her bones. She resumed cleaning, slowly, methodically, exactly the way she always did, because routine was armor, and armor kept you alive. 3 days later, the base exploded with news. A congressional delegation was coming. Senators, Defense Committee members, military brass from D.C. They wanted a full capability demonstration, air support, ground assault, precision fires, a show of force to justify next year's budget. And they wanted to see the sniper who'd made the impossible shot. Mara heard about it from Captain Morris, who found her in the armory looking uncomfortable and apologetic. Sergeant Knox, I'm supposed to inform you that you've been requested, personally, to participate in the demonstration. Mara didn't look up from the scope she was calibrating. Requested by who? Senator Carver. He's the chair of the Armed Services Committee. Apparently he read the classified brief on the embassy rescue and wants to see what America's most lethal sniper looks like in action. Morris winced. His words, not mine. Tell him no. Morris shifted his weight. I can't do that, Sergeant. This came down from the Secretary of Defense's office. It's not optional. Mara set down the scope, her movements careful, controlled. Captain, I'm not a performer. I don't shoot for applause. I understand that, but this is bigger than either of us. They're talking about funding for the next generation of sniper systems. Your demonstration could secure resources that save lives down the line. Mara's eyes hardened. Or it turns me into a circus act and undermines everything I've worked for. Morris had no answer for that. She stood, grabbing her rifle case. When? Tomorrow, 1400 hours, extended range. Mara walked past him without another word, leaving Morris standing alone in the armory, looking like he'd just delivered a death sentence. That night, Mara didn't sleep. She lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the base settling into its nocturnal rhythm. Distant voices, vehicle engines, the periodic crack of the perimeter fence swaying in the wind. Her mind ran through scenarios. The demonstration, the scrutiny, the inevitable questions about classified operations she couldn't discuss. The pressure to perform on demand, as if precision were a switch she could flip instead of a discipline she'd spent 11 years cultivating. She hated it, but she also understood it. The military ran on politics as much as it ran on bullets, and sometimes soldiers had to be symbols whether they wanted to be or not. At 0500, she gave up on sleep and went to the range. The facility was empty, bathed in the gray light of pre-dawn. Mara moved through her preparation ritual, rifle assembly, ammunition check, range calculation. She set up targets at 1,000 meters, 1,500, and 2,000. Then she settled into position and began shooting. Each shot was a meditation. Breath in, breath out. Trigger press. Follow through. The rifle's recoil became a heartbeat, steady and reassuring. She fired until the sun rose, until her shoulder ached, until the rhythm of the work drowned out everything else. When she finally stopped, every target bore a cluster of impacts so tight they looked like a single ragged hole. She was ready. She just wished she didn't have to be. The demonstration began at 1400 hours sharp. The VIP platform was packed. Senators in expensive suits, generals with chests full of ribbons, defense contractors with sharp eyes and sharper interest. Cameras lined the observation deck. Journalists scribbled notes. Someone had even set up a large monitor to display the downrange feed in real time. Mara arrived in her ACS, rifle case in hand, expression neutral. She ignored the stares, the whispers, the way Senator Carver leaned over to his aide and said something that made them both smile. General Hale was there, standing off to the side, arms crossed. Their eyes met briefly. He nodded once. She returned it. The range officer, the same master sergeant from the last demonstration, stepped forward with a microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, today you'll witness a live-fire demonstration of advanced long-range marksmanship. Staff Sergeant Mara Knox will engage targets at extended distances using a Barrett M82A1 anti-material rifle. Safety protocols are in effect. Please remain behind the yellow line at all times. Polite applause. Mara moved to the firing platform, ignoring the noise. She set down her case, opened it, and began assembling her rifle with the same methodical precision she used whether anyone was watching or not. Senator Carver's voice cut through the murmur. Sergeant Knox, can you tell us what makes you qualified for this kind of shooting? Mara didn't look up. Training, sir? Experience? Discipline? I understand you recently completed a mission with a confirmed kill at nearly 3,000 meters. Is that accurate? Mara's hands paused for a fraction of a second. Then she continued working. I can't discuss classified operations, sir. Carver smiled, the kind politicians used when they'd already decided how the conversation would end. Of course, but hypothetically, could you make a shot like that here, today? The platform went silent. Mara finished attaching her scope, then stood, turning to face the senator directly. Hypothetically, sir, if the target, conditions, and tactical necessity aligned, yes. Then let's see it. Mara's eyes narrowed. Sir? Carver gestured toward the range. Our furthest target is what, 2,000 meters? Let's make it interesting. Double it. The range officer stepped forward quickly. Senator, we don't have targets set beyond 2,500 meters. The range doesn't extend. Then put one there, Carver said, still smiling. Use a vehicle, a barrel, anything. I want to see if the reports are exaggerated or if we've actually got something worth the investment. Mara felt every eye on the platform turn toward her. She could see the calculation in their faces. This was a test, not of skill, but of obedience, of willingness to perform when ordered. Hale's voice cut through the tension. Senator, that's an unreasonable request. Environmental conditions aren't controlled. We haven't had time to survey the extended range for safety. General Hale, Carver interrupted smoothly, I appreciate your concern, but we're here to see what our military is capable of. If Sergeant Knox can't deliver under pressure, I need to know that before we allocate billions to programs based on her supposed capabilities. The words hung like a gauntlet thrown at Mara's feet. She could refuse, should refuse. This wasn't a tactical necessity. It was theater, political maneuvering disguised as validation. But she also knew what refusal would mean. Questions about her record, doubt about her capabilities, ammunition for budget cuts that would affect soldiers who had nothing to do with this dog and pony show. Mara looked at Hale. He shook his head slightly, a silent plea to walk away. Then she looked at the range stretching into the desert, calculating distances, wind patterns, the angle of the sun. 4,000 meters, she said quietly. The platform erupted in murmurs. Carver's smile widened. I'm sorry? Mara turned to face him fully. You want to see what I can do, Senator? Set a target at 4,000 meters. I'll make the shot. The range officer's face went pale. Sergeant, that's almost 2.5 miles. No one's ever made a shot like that in a training environment. The variables alone— I'm aware of the variables, Sergeant Major, Mara said, her voice calm but edged with something sharp. Set the target. I'll handle the rest. Carver's expression shifted, surprise giving way to something like eagerness. You're serious? I don't make jokes about my job, sir. For a moment, no one moved. Then Carver nodded to his aide. Make it happen. It took 90 minutes to set up the shot. A maintenance truck drove a decommissioned Humvee out to the 4,000-meter mark, positioning it broadside to the firing platform. They painted a 2-foot square on the door in bright orange. Then they retreated, leaving the vehicle alone in the desert heat. Through her scope, the Humvee looked like a toy, a speck of color against sand and rock. Mara lay prone on the platform, rifle settled, breathing controlled. Around her, the VIPs had gone silent. Even the journalists had stopped taking notes. Everyone understood they were about to witness something that defied conventional wisdom, or watch a very public failure. Samuels, who'd been pulled from the FOB specifically for this, lay beside her with the spotting scope. His voice was low, meant only for her. Mara, you don't have to do this. Carver's playing games. Walk away. Can't, she said quietly. Not anymore. Why? Because if I walk away, they'll say I couldn't do it. And the next time someone's life depends on a shot everyone says is impossible, they won't call. They'll assume it can't be done. Samuels was quiet for a moment. Then he settled into his scope. All right. Wind is variable. 8 to 15 knots from the west, temperature 94 degrees, humidity 12%. Mirage is heavy, heat distortion will affect the sight picture. Mara adjusted her scope, compensating for elevation. The bullet would drop nearly 80 feet over this distance. The flight time would be almost 6 seconds. The Earth's rotation would pull the round right. The wind would push it left. And all of it had to be calculated, accounted for, trusted. Range confirmed at 4,012 meters, Samuel said. Target is stable. Mara's breathing slowed. Her heartbeat settled into the rhythm she'd trained for years to achieve. The world narrowed to the view through her scope, the orange square, wavering in the heat, impossibly small, impossibly far. She waited. Minutes passed. The VIPs shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed. A camera clicked. Mara ignored it all. She was searching for the moment, the alignment, the instant when wind, temperature, trajectory, and opportunity converged into a window so narrow that hesitation meant failure. 10 minutes. 15. Senator Carver's voice drifted across the platform. How much longer is this going to... Mara fired. The rifle's thunder shattered the desert silence. Recoil slammed through her body. The muzzle blast kicked up a cloud of dust that obscured everything. Then, stillness. Samuels counted under his breath, tracking the bullet's flight. 3, 4, 5, 6. Everyone on the platform held their breath. Impact! The word came through the radio from the observers at the target. Confirmed impact. Downrange team reporting hit on target. Repeat. Hit on target. The platform erupted. Gasps, shouts. Someone started clapping, and then everyone was clapping, the sound building like a wave. Through the spotting scope's monitor feed, the orange square was visible, and in its center, a ragged hole where the .50 caliber round had punched through steel and kept going. 4,012 meters. One shot. Dead center. Senator Carver stood frozen, mouth slightly open, staring at the monitor like it had betrayed him. Hale's expression was unreadable, somewhere between pride and concern. And Mara just lay there, breathing slowly, staring through her scope at the target she'd just hit, feeling nothing but emptiness. Because the shot didn't matter. The applause didn't matter. What mattered was that she'd just proven something she'd spent years trying to keep quiet. She wasn't just good. She was singular. And now everyone knew it. The aftermath was chaos. Journalists swarmed. Questions flew like shrapnel. Defense contractors pulled Hale aside, talking about contracts and capabilities and funding. Senator Carver recovered quickly, pivoting from skepticism to championing, already drafting talking points about American military excellence. Mara packed her rifle in silence, ignoring the commotion, focusing on the mechanical ritual of disassembly and storage. Samuels appeared beside her, eyes still wide. That was... Mara, I don't even have words. She didn't respond. 4,000 meters in training conditions. Do you understand what you just did? You just rewrote the record books. I proved a point, Mara said quietly. That's all. That's all? Samuels laughed, slightly hysterical. You just... Lieutenant, Mara's voice cut through his excitement like a blade. It was a shot, in controlled conditions, with time to prepare. It means nothing compared to the real thing. Samuels fell silent. Mara finished packing her gear and stood, slinging the case over her shoulder. She could feel eyes on her from every direction, measuring, calculating, commodifying. She hated it. General Hale intercepted her before she could leave. "Knox, a word." They moved away from the crowd, finding a quiet corner near the equipment shed. Hale spoke first. "That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the most reckless." "It was necessary, sir." "Was it? Or did you just let them bait you into proving something you didn't need to prove?" Mara met his eyes. "If I'd refused, they would have assumed I couldn't do it. The mission in Karzon would have become a fluke, a lucky shot. And the next time someone needs the impossible, they won't believe it's possible. So you made yourself a target instead." "I made myself undeniable." Hale was quiet for a moment. Then he sighed. "You know what happens now, don't you? Every senator, every contractor, every journalist is going to want a piece of you. They're going to pull you into briefings, demonstrations, interviews. They're going to turn you into a symbol. I won't let them." "You won't have a choice." Mara's jaw tightened. "Then I'll refuse orders. And they'll reassign you, court-martial you if they have to. Knox, you just became the most valuable propaganda asset the military has. They won't let you disappear back into an armory." The weight of his words settled over her like a physical presence. Mara looked out at the desert, at the heat shimmer rising off the sand, at the target still sitting 4,000 meters away with a hole punched through its heart. "What would you do, sir?" she asked quietly. "If you were me?" Hale considered the question. Then he spoke, voice low. "I'd remember why I took the shot in the first place. Not for them, for the mission. For the people who needed me to be impossible." He paused. "And I'd make sure that no matter what happens next, that's the only thing that matters." Mara nodded slowly. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Hale turned to leave, pausing once more. "For what it's worth, Knox, that was the most remarkable thing I've ever witnessed. And I've seen a lot of remarkable things." "Thank you, sir." He left. Mara stood alone near the equipment shed, feeling the sun beat down on her shoulders, listening to the distant celebration still happening on the VIP platform. 4,000 meters, one shot, everything changed. She picked up her rifle case and walked toward the barracks, moving through the base like a ghost, invisible despite everything. Because some truths didn't need acknowledgement, they just needed to be undeniable. And now, hers was. The summons came at 600 the next morning, delivered by an MP who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Staff Sergeant Knox, you're ordered to report to General Hale's office immediately." Mara had been awake for 2 hours already, running the perimeter in the pre-dawn darkness, trying to outpace the feeling that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't control. She'd showered, changed into a fresh uniform, and was halfway through her second cup of coffee when the knock came. She arrived at Hale's office 7 minutes later. The general sat behind his desk, but he wasn't alone. Colonel Greer occupied one of the chairs, the JSOC officer who'd vouched for her capabilities weeks ago. Beside him sat a woman Mara didn't recognize, mid-50s, civilian clothes, sharp eyes that tracked movement like a predator measuring prey. Hale gestured to the empty chair. "Sit." Mara sat, spine straight, hands folded in her lap. Her eyes moved between the three faces, reading tension, calculation, something heavier than routine. "Sergeant Knox," Hale began, "this is Dr. Ellen Reyes. She's a strategic planning consultant with the Department of Defense. She advises on asset deployment and capability integration." Reyes smiled thinly. "In plain English, I help decide where rare talents are best utilized." Mara's jaw tightened fractionally. "Ma'am." Reyes pulled out a tablet, scrolling through data with practiced efficiency. "Your demonstration yesterday created quite a stir. The video has already been classified, but the senators saw enough. They're calling you a strategic asset, a force multiplier, the kind of capability that justifies entire programs." "I'm a soldier, ma'am, not a capability." "You're both," Reyes said simply. "And right now, very powerful people are trying to figure out how to use you most effectively." Mara looked at Hale. "Sir, permission to speak freely?" "Granted." "I don't want to be used. I want to do my job, the way I've always done it." Greer leaned forward. "Knox, your job just changed. Whether you accept that or not, the moment you made that shot, you became visible. and visible assets get deployed differently. Then make me invisible again. Can't be done, Reyes said. Too many people saw. Too many recordings exist. The cat's out of the bag, Sergeant. Mara felt something cold settle in her chest. So what happens now? Hale exchanged glances with Greer, then spoke. Command wants to activate you full-time, pull you from armory operations and integrate you into a dedicated special operations task force. You train with Tier 1 units, deploy on high-value missions, operate under the kind of clearance that keeps your work classified, but your capabilities accessible. And if I refuse? Silence fell heavy. Reyes set down her tablet. Then you'll be reassigned to a training role. You'll spend the next 5 years teaching marksmanship fundamentals to recruits who will never take a shot that matters. Your skills will atrophy, your value will diminish, and when the next impossible situation arises, someone else will try and fail because you weren't there. The words landed like body blows. Mara's breathing stayed controlled, but her hands tightened slightly in her lap. You're saying I don't have a choice. You always have a choice, Hale said quietly. But choices have consequences. And right now, your choice is between embracing what you are or spending the rest of your career pretending you're something less. Mara looked down at her hands, clean, steady. The same hands that had just punched a hole through steel from 2.5 miles away. The same hands that had saved 16 lives in Karzan. The same hands that reassembled her rifle every night with meditative precision. How long do I have to decide? She asked. 72 hours, Reyes said. After that, personnel orders will be cut one way or another. Mara stood. Then I'll have my answer in 72 hours, ma'am. She saluted and left before anyone could respond. She didn't go back to the armory. Instead, Mara found herself walking the base perimeter, hands shoved in her pockets, mind churning through scenarios and outcomes. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning cool, turning the base into a heat shimmer landscape that felt surreal. Embracing what she was meant becoming a tool. A precision instrument pulled out when needed, put away when not. No autonomy, no quiet, no chance to just exist. But refusing meant irrelevance, watching from the sidelines as situations spiraled because she'd chosen pride over purpose. Neither option felt right. She was still walking when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to find Samuels jogging to catch up, slightly out of breath. Mara, wait! She stopped, waiting. Samuels caught up, hands on his knees, breathing hard. I heard about the meeting, about the choice they're giving you. Word travels fast. Base this size? Always does. He straightened, meeting her eyes. For what it's worth, I think you should take it. The SOF assignment. Mara's expression didn't change. Why? Because I've seen what you can do. And I've seen what happens when people who can do what you do decide to hide instead. He paused. My dad was a pilot, flew Apaches in Iraq. He was the best in his unit, but he got tired of the deployments, the pressure, the constant scrutiny. So he requested a transfer to training command, spent the next 8 years teaching kids to fly. And he was miserable. Every day he'd come home and talk about the missions he wasn't flying, the operations he wasn't part of, the difference he could have made if he'd just stayed in the fight. Samuels's voice softened. He died 3 years ago, heart attack, and I think part of what killed him was the regret of walking away from what he was meant to do. Mara was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke. What if what I'm meant to do kills me instead? Then at least you'll die doing something that matters, instead of dying slowly in a classroom, teaching theory to people who will never understand. The words hung between them. Samuel shifted his weight. Look, I don't know what the right answer is. I just know that yesterday when you made that shot, that wasn't just skill. That was purpose. Like you were doing exactly what you were built for, and watching you walk away from that would feel like watching someone extinguish a light the world needs. Mara studied him for a moment. Then she nodded once. Thank you, Lieutenant. For what? For being honest. She walked away, leaving Samuel standing in the sun, watching her go. That night, Mara sat alone in her quarters, staring at a file folder she'd kept locked in her footlocker for years. It contained everything from her recruitment, the psychological evaluations, the aptitude tests, the classified assessments that had flagged her as exceptional candidate for high-risk, high-precision operations. She'd been 19 when they'd pulled her from basic training. A drill sergeant had noticed something, not her shooting scores, which were good but not remarkable. He'd noticed how she processed stress, how she stayed calm when others panicked, how she could calculate angles and distances in her head while under simulated fire. He'd written a report. That report had reached someone in JSOC, and 3 weeks later, Mara had been sitting in a windowless room with two officers who'd asked her a single question. "How do you feel about doing things most people consider impossible?" She'd answered honestly, "I don't know if they're impossible. I just know I'd like to find out." 6 months later, she was in a training program that didn't officially exist. Learning ballistics theory from physicists, studying meteorology with former storm chasers, practicing breath control with Olympic shooters, building a foundation that would let her do what no one else could. They'd molded her, refined her, turned her into something singular. And then they'd asked her to hide, because assets like her were too valuable to risk on routine missions, too specialized to waste on conventional warfare. They'd told her she'd be activated only when absolutely necessary, when the impossible became required. She'd accepted that, had even embraced it. The waiting, the patience, the discipline of being ready without needing recognition. But yesterday had shattered that equilibrium. And now she had to decide if she'd ever really had a choice, or if the choice had been made for her 11 years ago in that windowless room. Mara closed the folder, locked it away, and lay back on her bunk. Outside, the base settled into its nocturnal rhythm. Inside, Mara stared at the ceiling and wondered if she'd ever really been invisible, or if she'd just been waiting for permission to be seen. The next morning, she found General Hale in the officers' mess, sitting alone with a cup of coffee and a newspaper he wasn't reading. Mara approached, standing at attention until he looked up. "Knox, sit." She sat, folding her hands on the table. "Sir, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." "Always am." "Did you know? When you first saw my badge, when you questioned me in the armory, did you know what I was?" Hale set down his coffee. "I knew you were something. I didn't know what until I read your file, or tried to, anyway. And now, after the demonstration, now I know you're the most dangerous weapon I've ever encountered. And I don't mean that as a compliment." Mara blinked. "Sir?" Hale leaned forward, voice low. "Weapons are tools, Knox. They don't think. They don't feel. They just do what they're designed to do. And right now, very powerful people want to turn you into exactly that. A tool they can aim and fire whenever convenient. And you think I should refuse? I think you should understand what you're agreeing to before you agree to it." He paused. "I've seen what happens to soldiers who become symbols. The weight of expectation, the pressure to perform, the loss of autonomy. It breaks some of them, corrupts others. Very few survive it intact. But some do." "Some do," Hale agreed. "The ones who remember why they started, who keep their purpose clear even when everyone else forgets it." Mara was quiet for a moment. "What was your purpose, sir, when you started?" Hale smiled faintly. "I wanted to lead people, to make decisions that kept them alive, to be the kind of officer who understood that every order had consequences measured in lives." He paused. "Somewhere along the way, I got good at it, started getting promoted, started sitting in meetings instead of leading troops, started making decisions based on politics instead of people." "Do you regret it?" "Every day," Hale said quietly. "But I also know that the decisions I make now, even the political ones, keep soldiers alive, just in different ways." He picked up his coffee, took a sip, then set it down. "Knox, whatever you decide, make sure it's your decision. Not theirs, not mine. Yours, because you're the one who has to live with it." Mara nodded slowly. "Thank you, sir." She stood to leave. "Knox," she turned back, "for what it's worth, I think you're more than what they're trying to turn you into, and I hope you remember that." 48 hours later, Mara walked into General Hale's office and delivered her answer. Hale sat behind his desk. Greer occupied the same chair as before. Dr. Reyes had been replaced by a different DOD official, a man named Harris, who looked like he measured success in spreadsheets and efficiency metrics. "Sergeant Knox," Hale said formally. "You have a decision?" Mara stood at attention, spine straight, eyes forward. "I do, sir." "And?" I accept the special operations assignment, with conditions. Harris frowned. Soldiers don't negotiate conditions, Sergeant. I'm not negotiating, Mara said evenly. I'm stating the terms under which I'll be most effective. Greer smiled slightly. Go on. Mara pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket and set it on Hale's desk. First, I maintain autonomy over mission acceptance. If I assess a shot as tactically unsound or unnecessarily risky, I can refuse without repercussion. Second, no public demonstrations, no media access, no congressional tours. I work in the shadows or I don't work at all. Third, I retain my current rank and pay grade. No promotions tied to publicity or political maneuvering. Harris looked at the paper like it had personally offended him. This is highly irregular. So is making a shot at 4,000 meters, Mara replied. You want irregular capabilities, you accommodate irregular requirements. Hale read through the conditions, expression unreadable. Then he looked up at Greer. Colonel? Greer nodded. I can work with this. JSOC operates on mission effectiveness, not publicity. As long as she delivers results, command won't care about the rest. Harris still looked skeptical. And if she refuses a mission we deem critical? Then you find someone else, Mara said flatly. There are other snipers, other options. But if you want me specifically, you accept that I'm not a bullet you fire indiscriminately. I'm a precision instrument, and precision requires judgment. The room fell silent. Then Hale picked up a pen and signed the paper. Approved. Greer, draw up the orders. Harris, inform command that Knox's conditions are non-negotiable. Harris opened his mouth to protest, then seemed to think better of it. He nodded curtly and left. Greer stood, extending his hand to Mara. Welcome to the team, Sergeant. You report to Fort Bragg in 2 weeks for integration training. Mara shook his hand. Understood, sir. Greer left, closing the door behind him. Mara stood alone with Hale, the weight of what she'd just agreed to settling into her bones. Hale leaned back in his chair. You know they'll push back on those conditions, try to erode them over time. I know. And you'll have to fight to maintain them, constantly. I know that too. Hale studied her for a long moment. Then why agree at all? Mara met his eyes. Because Lieutenant Samuels was right. Hiding from what I am doesn't make me less dangerous. It just makes me useless, and I'd rather be dangerous and purposeful than safe and forgotten. Hale nodded slowly. That's the most honest thing I've heard all week. He stood, moving around the desk. For a moment, Mara thought he might salute. Instead, he extended his hand. Good luck, Knox. And remember, no matter what happens, you're still a soldier. Not a weapon, not a symbol, a soldier. Don't let them convince you otherwise. Mara shook his hand, feeling the firmness of his grip, the certainty in his eyes. I won't, sir. She spent her last 2 weeks at Ironcliff closing out her responsibilities. The armory had to be handed off to her replacement. A young specialist who looked terrified at the prospect of maintaining weapons Mara had spent months calibrating. She walked him through every detail, patient and thorough, making sure nothing would be lost in the transition. She ran the perimeter one last time, memorizing the feel of the base under her boots, the smell of diesel and dust, the sound of formations moving in synchronized rhythm. She cleaned her rifle one final time in the corner that had been hers for 8 months, wiping down each component, checking each tolerance, preparing for whatever came next. On her final night, General Hale found her there. Thought I'd find you here, he said, leaning against the doorframe. Mara looked up from the barrel she was inspecting. Hard to break old habits, sir. Good habits shouldn't be broken. He stepped inside, hands clasped behind his back. I got word from Bragg. Your integration team is top tier. Delta operators, SEAL snipers, agency contractors. You'll be working with the best. Good. I'd rather work with people who understand what I do than people who just want to watch. Hale smiled faintly. You'll fit in better than you think. He paused, then pulled something from his pocket. A small case, leather, worn. He set it on the workbench beside Mara's rifle. What's this? She asked. Open it. Mara opened the case. Inside was a single medal, the Distinguished Service Cross. Not new. The ribbon was faded, the metal tarnished slightly at the edges. That was mine, Hale said quietly. From Afghanistan, 2003. I made a call that saved my platoon but violated about 6 different ROE protocols. They gave me that medal and a formal reprimand in the same week. Mara looked up at him, confused. I'm not giving it to you for what you've done, Hale continued. I'm giving it to you to remember something. The medals don't matter. The recognition doesn't matter. What matters is the people you save and the principles you keep. Everything else is noise. Mara stared at the medal, feeling the weight of it. Not the medal, but what it represented. Trust, respect, understanding. Sir, I can't accept this. You already have. Consider it an order. He smiled. Besides, I have a feeling you'll earn your own soon enough. Might as well have one to compare it against. Mara closed the case carefully, setting it beside her rifle. Thank you, sir. Hale nodded. Then he straightened, formal again. Sergeant Knox, it's been an honor serving with you. Give them hell at Bragg. I will, sir. He left. And Mara sat alone in the armory one last time, surrounded by the tools of her trade, holding a medal she hadn't earned but would carry anyway. Because some gifts weren't about what you'd done. They were about what you were trusted to become. Boss say that. The transport left at 600. Mara loaded her gear into the back of a nondescript truck. Rifle case, duffel bag, footlocker containing everything that mattered. The driver was a civilian contractor who didn't ask questions and didn't make small talk. Perfect. As the truck rolled through the gates, Mara looked back one last time. Ironcliff Base sat quiet in the early morning light. Formations running PT, vehicles heading to the motor pool. The rhythm of routine continuing without her. She'd been invisible here. Safe. Protected by obscurity and routine. But that version of her life was over. Now came the part where she stepped into the light. On her terms, with her conditions. Carrying the weight of what she'd proven and the responsibility it demanded. The truck turned onto the highway, and the base disappeared behind a rise of desert hills. Mara settled into her seat, closed her eyes, and let herself feel it. The fear, the anticipation, the certainty that everything had just changed. When she opened her eyes again, the fear was gone. Only the purpose remained. Because Mara Knox wasn't running toward glory or recognition or validation. She was running toward the moment when someone would need the impossible. And when that moment came, when lives hung in the balance and failure wasn't an option, she'd be ready, quiet, precise, undeniable, just like she'd always been. The truck rolled on through the desert, carrying her toward a future she couldn't see but had already committed to, and somewhere in the distance, a target waited. She just didn't know it yet. Fort Bragg hit like a wall of humidity and purpose. The truck dropped Mara at the main gate just after 1400 hours. The base sprawled across thousands of acres, home to Special Operations Command, Delta Force, Psychological Operations, and units whose names never appeared on any roster. The air tasted like pine and gunpowder, and every soldier she passed moved with the kind of focused intensity that came from knowing their next mission could deploy in hours. A captain met her at the processing center, young, fit, eyes that had seen combat and hadn't blinked. Staff Sergeant Knox? Yes, sir. Captain Reeves. I'm your liaison for integration. Follow me. They moved through the base in silence, passing training facilities that looked more like movie sets than military installations, kill houses for close-quarters combat, ranges that stretched to the horizon, helicopter pads where MH-60S sat ready with rotors folded. Reeves led her to a nondescript building marked only with a number. Inside, the temperature dropped 10 degrees. Secure facility. Soundproofed walls. The kind of place where classified conversations happen daily. He stopped at a conference room door. Your team's waiting. They've been briefed on your capabilities. Most of them are skeptical. Prove them wrong. I don't need to prove anything, sir. Reeves smiled slightly. Good answer. He opened the door. 6 faces turned toward her. 5 men, 1 woman. All of them looked like they'd been carved from granite and stress. Operators. The real deal. A man at the head of the table stood. Mid-40s, scarred jaw, eyes like flint. Sergeant Knox. I'm Master Sergeant Torres. I run this unit. Have a seat. Mara sat, setting her rifle case on the floor beside her chair. Torres gestured around the table. These are your teammates. Hernandez, close protection specialist. Kim, communications and intelligence. Vega, explosives and breaching. Martinez, combat medic. And Collins, overwatch and tactical coordination. Each operator nodded as their name was called. None smiled. None spoke. Torres sat back down. We've read your file. What wasn't redacted, anyway? Impressive shots, impressive record. But we need to establish something right now. This isn't a solo act. You don't take shots without coordination. You don't make calls without consulting the team. Understood? Mara met his eyes evenly. Understood. But I also don't take shots I'm not confident in. If the tactical picture doesn't align with capability, I'll say so. Hernandez, a stocky Latino with arms like tree trunks, snorted. You saying you know better than the mission commander? I'm saying I know my limitations, and I won't pretend otherwise just to make someone feel comfortable. The room went quiet. Then Collins, the other woman, lean and hard-eyed, leaned forward. Good. Last sniper we had would take any shot command asked for. Got 2 hostages killed in Yemen because he couldn't admit the angle was wrong. Torres nodded slowly. We work on trust here, Knox. Knox. You trust us to get you into position and keep you alive. We trust you to tell us what's possible and what's suicide. Can you do that? Yes, Sergeant. Then welcome to Task Force Wraith. We deploy in 3 days. Training starts now, Shab. The next 72 hours were the most intense of Mara's career. They ran her through scenarios that made her previous training look like basic drills. Hostage rescue in urban environments, target interdiction during active firefights, counter-sniper operations against trained adversaries. Every exercise pushed her to the edge of her capabilities, and then kept pushing. But she held. On the second day, Torres put her in a simulation, rooftop overwatch while the team assaulted a building 300 meters away. Hostile snipers in elevated positions, civilians moving through the streets, a target that had to be neutralized before the breach or the entire team died. Mara identified the hostile sniper in 8 seconds, calculated the shot in 12, fired on 18. The simulator registered a clean kill. Torres reviewed the footage afterward, arms crossed. How'd you spot him so fast? Shadow inconsistency. Everyone else on that rooftop was casting shadows consistent with the sun angle. His was off by 3 degrees, meant he was using artificial concealment. Kim whistled low. That's good. That's scary, Vega corrected. She out outthought a computer simulation. Mara didn't respond. She was already mentally filing the lesson. Artificial concealment created micro-tells. Remember that. On the 3rd day, they gave her the real test. Live fire exercise. Actual targets. Decommissioned vehicles placed at ranges from 800 to 2,400 meters. Variable wind. Time pressure. The team moving through a simulated combat zone, while Mara provided overwatch from a ridgeline. She took 11 shots in 30 minutes. 10 hits. 1 miss when a wind gust shifted mid-flight. When it was over, Torres climbed up to her position, breathing hard from the elevation. That miss, he said. What happened? Wind shear, thermal layer shifted. I didn't compensate fast enough. What would you do different? Wait 3 more seconds. Let the gust pass. Take the shot in the calm window. Torres nodded. And if 3 seconds meant the team died? Mara met his eyes. Then I'd take the shot and accept the odds, but I'd rather wait and guarantee the hit. Torres studied her for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. You'll do, Knox. You'll do just fine. She shook it, feeling the calluses, the strength, the approval. For the first time since arriving, she felt like she belonged. Quote, the deployment came faster than expected. 18 hours after the final training exercise, the team was wheels up on a C-17 headed east. Classified destination, classified mission. The only thing Mara knew for certain was that lives were at stake and her rifle was needed. The briefing happened in flight. Torres stood at the front of the cargo bay, tablet in hand, expression grim. Intelligence has located a high-value target, Ahmad Kassir, logistics coordinator for a network responsible for attacks across 3 countries. He's hiding in a compound in the Wakhan corridor, mountainous, remote. No air support due to political sensitivities. Ground assault isn't an option. The approach is mined and the compound is fortified. He pulled up satellite imagery. Kassir moves between buildings on a predictable schedule. 0600 local time, he crosses from the main house to a secondary structure approximately 40 meters away. It's a 15-second window. That's our shot. Mara studied the image. Range. 3,100 meters. Elevation difference of 400 meters. Wind variable up to 20 knots. Hernandez shook his head. That's insane. That's why Knox is here, Torres said flatly. He looked at Mara. Can you make it? Mara examined the terrain, the angles, the probable wind patterns in mountain valleys at dawn. It was ugly, complex, the kind of shot that required everything to align perfectly. I can make it, she said, but I'll need time to set up, at least 6 hours before the window. You'll have 8. We insert tonight, move to the firing position under darkness, and wait for dawn. The team exchanged glances. No one objected. Torres continued, rules of engagement, positive ID on Cassier, no collateral damage, 1 shot. If you miss, he goes to ground and we lose him for months, maybe years. The weight of that settled over the cargo bay like a physical presence. Mara nodded once. Understood. They inserted at midnight, fast roping from a Black Hawk into terrain so rugged it looked like the surface of another planet. Jagged peaks, boulder fields, air so thin each breath felt incomplete. The team moved in tactical silence, hand signals, night vision, every step calculated. Mara carried her rifle case in a pack loaded with environmental sensors, ballistic computers, and enough ammunition for a dozen shots she hoped she wouldn't need to take. The climb took 4 hours. By the time they reached the firing position, a rocky outcropping overlooking the valley where Cassier's compound sat like a fortress, Mara's legs burned and her lungs ached, but her hands were steady. Colin set up the security perimeter while Mara began her preparation. She assembled her rifle with methodical precision, then deployed her instruments. Anemometer to measure wind speed and direction, Kestrel to track temperature, humidity, and barometric pressure. Laser rangefinder to confirm distance, 3,127 meters. Elevation difference, 412 meters. Wind, 14 knots, gusting to 18, direction shifting between northwest and west-northwest. Mara ran the calculations in her head, then input them into her ballistic computer for verification. The bullet would drop nearly 90 feet over that distance. Wind drift would push it left, then right as it descended through different thermal layers. The shot would take almost 7 seconds, an eternity in precision shooting. Torres crouched beside her. How's it looking? Difficult. The valley creates thermal turbulence. Wind isn't consistent across the flight path. Can you make it? Mara was quiet for 3 seconds. Then she nodded. Yes, but I'll need to wait for the wind to stabilize. If I shoot into active gusts, the margin of error increases to unacceptable levels. How long? However long it takes. Torres accepted that. We've got your back. Take your time. He moved away, leaving Mara alone with her rifle and the darkness. She settled into position, prone. Rifle supported by a bipod and rear bag. Cheek weld perfect. Eye relief optimal. Body aligned with the weapon so recoil would transfer cleanly through her frame. Then she waited. The sky lightened gradually, black giving way to deep purple, then indigo, then the pale blue of pre-dawn. Stars faded. The valley below emerged from darkness like a photograph developing in slow motion. At 05:45, lights appeared in the compound. Movement. Figures crossing between buildings, preparing for the day. At 05:55, a door opened in the main house. Mara's pulse didn't change. She'd been controlling her breathing for the past hour, staying in the rhythm that kept her heart rate low and steady. Through her scope, she watched a man step outside. Tall, bearded, moving with the confidence of someone who believed himself untouchable. Kim's voice came through the radio, barely a whisper. Facial recognition confirms. That's Cassier. Mara tracked him through her scope. He paused, said something to a guard, then began walking toward the secondary building. The 15-second window had begun. Mara's fingers settled on the trigger, not pulling, just resting, waiting. The wind in the valley had been gusting erratically for the past 30 minutes, but now, in this moment, it calmed. The flags on the compound walls hung still. The dust settled. Mara exhaled halfway, holding the rest. The world narrowed to the view through her scope, to Cassier's profile, to the calculation she'd run 100 times in her head. Lead him by half a body length, account for the elevation drop, trust the wind will hold for 7 seconds. She pulled the trigger. The rifle roared. Recoil slammed into her shoulder. The muzzle blast echoed across the valley like distant thunder. 7 seconds. Through the scope, Mara watched. The bullet traced an invisible arc through the air, dropping, drifting, seeking its target with mathematical precision. Kassir took another step toward the building, then his head snapped back, his body crumpled. Kim's voice crackled through the radio. Impact confirmed. Target down. Repeat. Target down. The compound erupted in chaos. Guards running, shouting, searching for a threat they couldn't see. Torres keyed his radio. Exfil now. Move, move, move. The team collapsed back from the position, moving fast and low, putting distance between themselves and the shot's origin. Mara broke down her rifle as she moved, stripping the scope, collapsing the bipod, packing everything with practiced efficiency. They reached the extraction point 40 minutes later, lungs burning, legs screaming. The Black Hawk was already inbound, rotors cutting through the thin mountain air. They piled inside and the helicopter banked hard away from the mountains, leaving the valley behind. In the cargo bay, surrounded by her team, Mara sat with her rifle case across her lap and let herself breathe fully for the first time in hours. Collins leaned over, shouting above the rotor noise. That was the most insane thing I've ever seen. 3,000 meters in mountain wind. Mara didn't respond. She just closed her eyes, feeling the adrenaline drain away, replaced by the familiar emptiness that followed every successful shot. One target. One shot. One life ended so others could continue. The math was simple. The wait never was. The debrief happened at a secure facility Mara didn't recognize. Command was pleased. The operation had been clean, precise, politically viable. Kassir's death would disrupt network operations for months, maybe years. No collateral damage, no diplomatic incident, just results. But Mara barely heard the praise. She sat in the conference room, hands folded on the table, mind already moving past the mission to the next one. Because there would be a next one. And another after that. An endless cycle of impossible shots and impossible expectations. Torres found her afterward in the armory, cleaning her rifle. You okay? He asked. Mara looked up. Yes, Sergeant. You don't look okay. She set down the cleaning rod. I'm processing. Processing what? Mara was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke. I killed a man this morning from 3,000 meters away. He never saw me, never knew I existed, never had a chance to defend himself, and everyone's acting like I just won a medal. Torres pulled up a stool sitting across from her. You did win a medal. They're writing you up for the Silver Star. I don't want it. Doesn't matter. You earned it. He paused. Knox, you want to know what Kassir was responsible for? Mara didn't answer. 17 suicide bombings across 3 countries, 43 dead civilians, 12 dead soldiers, families destroyed, communities shattered. He planned it, funded it, facilitated it. And he was working on something bigger. Intelligence suggested a coordinated attack on a school. Torres leaned forward. You stopped that. With one shot. One precise, impossible shot that saved lives we'll never be able to count. So yeah, people are acting like you won a medal. Because in every way that matters, you did. Mara met his eyes. Does it get easier, carrying that? No, Torres said honestly. It doesn't, but it gets clearer. You understand why it matters, and that makes the weight bearable. He stood, placing a hand on her shoulder. Welcome to Wraithnas, Knox. For real this time. He left, and Mara sat alone with her rifle, feeling the truth of his words settle into her bones. The weight would never get lighter, but she'd carry it anyway, because someone had to. 6 months later, Mara stood in General Hale's office at the Pentagon. She'd been summoned. No explanation, just orders to report in dress uniform. She'd flown in from Fort Bragg that morning, still tired from a mission in North Africa that had ended 3 days ago. Hale sat behind a massive desk that looked completely wrong for him. Too clean, too political. Knox, sit. She sat, spine straight, hands folded. Hale studied her for a moment. You look different. Different how, sir? Older. Not in years, in weight. Mara didn't respond. Hale leaned forward. I've been reading your after-action reports. 7 missions in 6 months. 7 successful engagements. Not a single shot wasted. Not a single civilian casualty. Command is calling you the most effective precision asset in the theater. I'm just doing my job, sir. Your job is rewriting what we thought was possible. He paused. But I didn't call you here to praise you. I called you here to check in, because I made you a promise before you left Ironcliff. I told you to remember you're a soldier, not a weapon, and I want to know if you still believe that. Mara was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke. I take shots that end lives. I do it from distances most people can't comprehend. I operate in shadows and silence. By every definition that matters, I am a weapon." Hale's expression hardened. "But," Mara continued, "I'm a weapon wielded by people who understand what I cost, what each shot costs. Torres makes sure I know the intelligence behind every target. Collins briefs me on the lives saved by every engagement. They don't let me forget that the math isn't just numbers, it's people, families, futures." She met Hale's eyes. "So yes, sir, I'm still a soldier, because soldiers understand that violence isn't the goal, it's the last resort, and every time I pull a trigger, I'm honoring that." Hale leaned back, the tension in his shoulders releasing. "Good. That's good." He opened a drawer and pulled out a small box. "This is for you. Don't open it until you're alone." Mara took the box, feeling its weight. "Sir?" "Just trust me." She stood, saluting. "Thank you, sir." "Knox." She paused at the door. "You've become exactly what I hoped you would. Someone who can do the impossible without losing sight of why it matters. Don't let anyone take that from you." "I won't, sir." She left. Chad. Mara opened the box that night in her quarters at Fort Bragg. Inside was a photograph, old, faded. It showed a young soldier, maybe 20, standing in desert camo, rifle slung, smiling at the camera with the kind of hope that came before war taught you better. On the back, written in Hale's handwriting, "This was me before I forgot why I started. Don't let the wait make you forget." R.H. Mara stared at the photo for a long time. Then she placed it on her desk next to the leather case containing Hale's Distinguished Service Cross. 2 reminders, 2 anchors. She was a weapon. That truth was undeniable. But she was a weapon wielded by principles that mattered, by people who understood the cost, by a purpose bigger than any single shot. And as long as she remembered that, the weight would stay bearable. 3 years later, Mara Knox received a summons she'd been expecting and dreading in equal measure. The Secretary of Defense wanted to meet her, personally. She arrived at his office in dress uniform, medals she'd tried to refuse now pinned to her chest. Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor, 3 Army Commendation Medals. Each one represented a shot, a life, a decision that would follow her forever. The Secretary, a former general with gray hair and knowing eyes, stood when she entered. "Staff Sergeant Knox, thank you for coming." "Sir?" He gestured to a chair. They sat. "I've been reviewing your record," he said. 43 confirmed engagements, 43 successful outcomes. You've saved hundreds of lives, maybe thousands, when we count secondary effects. You've become a legend in the special operations community." Mara remained silent. "But legends have a shelf life," the Secretary continued. "Bodies break down, reflexes slow, and I've been told by your unit commander that you've started requesting fewer deployments." "That's correct, sir." "Why?" Mara met his eyes. "Because I'm not a machine. Every shot takes something, and I've given enough that I need to be careful about what's left." The Secretary nodded slowly. "Fair answer, so I'm giving you a choice. You can continue with Wraith, reduce deployment schedule, training role, mentorship of the next generation. Or you can retire with full honors and benefits, effective immediately." Mara felt something shift in her chest. "Retire, sir? You've served with distinction, exceeded every expectation. No one would question your decision to step away." Mara was quiet for a long moment, thinking about Ironcliff, about Hale's warning, about the weight she'd been carrying for years. Then she spoke. "What happens to the mission if I retire? Who takes the shots I would have taken?" "We'll find someone. We always do." "But will they make them?" The Secretary's expression softened. "Honestly, probably not all of them. You're a rare combination of skill, discipline, and judgment. That's not easy to replace." Mara nodded slowly. "Then I'll stay. Reduce schedule, training role. But when the impossible call comes, when lives are on the line and no one else can make the shot, you call me, and I'll answer." The Secretary smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." He stood, extending his hand. "Thank you, Sergeant Knox, for your service, for your sacrifice, and for being exactly what this country needed when it needed it most." Mara shook his hand, feeling the weight of those words, the recognition she'd never wanted but had finally learned to accept. She left the Pentagon that afternoon and flew back to Fort Bragg, back to the team that had become her family, back to the rifle that had become her voice. and for the first time in years, she felt something close to peace. 5 years after that meeting, Staff Sergeant Mara Knox stood on the training range at Fort Bragg, watching a young soldier, barely 20, line up a shot at 1,000 meters. The kid was shaking, nervous, trying too hard. Mara walked over, kneeling beside him. "What's wrong?" I can't make this shot, Sergeant. The wind's too variable. The angle's wrong." "Then don't take it." The kid looked up, confused. "What?" "If the shot's not there, don't force it. Wait for the moment. Trust the process. And if the moment never comes, accept that and move to plan B." "But the instructors said," "The instructors aren't the ones pulling the trigger. You are. And you're the only one who can decide if you're ready." Mara paused. "So are you?" The kid looked back at the target, breathing deeply. Then he settled into position, waited for the wind to calm, and fired. The target pinged. Center mass. The kid's face lit up. Mara stood, patting his shoulder. "Good. Now do it again. And again, until it stops being luck and starts being skill." She walked away, leaving the kid to his practice, feeling the satisfaction that came not from taking the shot herself, but from teaching someone else how. That night, she sat in her quarters, cleaning her rifle one last time before locking it away. She didn't deploy much anymore. Maybe once or twice a year when the call came and no one else could answer it. But she was ready, always ready. Because some things you didn't retire from, some purposes you carried until they carried you out. And Mara Knox had made peace with that. The final call came on a Tuesday. Mara was in the middle of teaching an advanced ballistics class when Torres appeared in the doorway, expression grim. She knew immediately. She dismissed the class, grabbed her gear, and met Torres in the briefing room. "What's the situation?" Torres pulled up satellite imagery. "American journalist kidnapped by militants in the Sahel. They're moving her to an execution site. We have a 12-hour window before they broadcast her death online." "Rescue team?" "Can't get there in time, but we have eyes on the convoy. 1 vehicle, 6 hostiles, 1 hostage. They're traveling through open desert, flat terrain, minimal cover." Mara studied the image. "Range? 4,200 meters, maybe more depending on where they stop." The room went silent. 4,200 meters. Further than she'd ever shot operationally. Further than anyone had ever shot. Torres looked at her. "Can you make it?" Mara thought about the young soldier she'd trained that morning. Thought about Hale's photograph on her desk. Thought about every shot she'd ever taken and every life she'd saved. Then she nodded. "Get me there. I'll make it." They inserted by helicopter at dawn, landing on a ridge overlooking the vast expanse of desert where the convoy would pass. Mara set up her position with the precision of someone who'd done this 100 times, deploying sensors, calculating variables, preparing for a shot that defied everything she knew about physics and probability. Collins worked the spotting scope beside her. "Wind's brutal, gusting up to 25 knots, temperature climbing. Mirage is going to make target identification nearly impossible." "I know." "Mara, this is beyond anything we've ever attempted." Mara didn't look away from her scope. "I know that too." The convoy appeared 2 hours later, a single technical truck crawling across the desert, kicking up a plume of dust visible for miles. Through her scope, Mara could barely make out the figures inside. 6 men, 1 woman with her hands bound. Range, 4,287 meters. She ran the calculations. The bullet would drop over 100 feet. Flight time would exceed 8 seconds. Wind would push it in 3 different directions as it descended through thermal layers. The margin of error was measured in inches. Collins spoke quietly. "We have authorization. When you're ready." Mara settled deeper into her position, breathing slowing, heart rate dropping into the rhythm she'd spent 15 years perfecting. She waited. The truck drove for another kilometer, then stopped. The hostiles climbed out, dragging the journalist with them. They were setting up a camera, preparing for the execution. Mara tracked the lead hostile through her scope, the one holding a weapon to the journalist's head. This was it. The impossible shot. The one that would either save a life or haunt her forever. She exhaled halfway. The world narrowed to the crosshairs, to the calculation, to the moment when everything aligned. She pulled the trigger. The rifle thundered. 8 seconds of silence. Then, "Impact!" Collins shouted. "Target down! Hostile down!" Through the scope, Mara watched the lead militant collapse. The others scattered, confused, searching for a threat they couldn't comprehend. The journalist ran. Within minutes, the rescue team, positioned closer but unable to engage without Mara's shot, swept in and extracted her. Mission success. Mara lowered her rifle, hand steady, breathing controlled. Collins looked at her with something like awe. That was... I don't even have words. Mara didn't respond. She just began breaking down her rifle, packing her gear, preparing for exfil. Because the shot was done. The impossible had become possible one more time. And that was enough. 6 months later, Mara Knox officially retired from active duty. No ceremony, no speeches, just a quiet transition from the uniform she'd worn for 16 years to civilian life that felt both foreign and strangely peaceful. She moved to Montana, back to the mountains she'd grown up in, back to the silence she'd always craved. She bought a small piece of land with a view that stretched for miles and built a workshop where she could work on rifles and teach the occasional student who sought her out. Torres visited once, brought the team. They sat around a fire, drinking coffee, telling stories about missions they'd never be able to discuss publicly. "You miss it?" Torres asked. Mara looked out at the mountains, at the vast expanse of sky and stone. "Sometimes. But I did what I was meant to do, and now I'm doing what I need to do. Which is? Living. Without the weight. Without the waiting." Torres nodded, understanding. They stayed until dawn, then left her in peace. And Mara stood on her porch, watching the sun rise over the mountains, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Complete. She'd been a weapon, a soldier, a symbol, a legend whispered about in secure facilities and redacted files. But more than any of that, she'd been someone who understood that greatness wasn't about being seen. It was about being ready when no one else could be. It was about making the impossible possible when lives hung in the balance. It was about carrying the weight so others didn't have to. And now, finally, she could set it down. Not because she was broken, not because she'd failed, but because she'd given everything she had, exactly when it mattered most. And that was enough. Months. Years later, a young soldier arrived at Mara's door. He'd been sent by Torres with a message. The impossible was needed again. Mara looked at the soldier, saw herself in his eyes, nervous and determined and carrying a weight he didn't fully understand yet. She smiled gently. "Tell Torres I'm retired." "Ma'am, he said you'd say that. He also said to remind you that some purposes don't retire. They just wait for the moment that matters." Mara was quiet for a long moment, feeling the old rhythm stirring in her chest. The focus, the certainty, the knowledge that somewhere, someone needed the impossible. Then she nodded. "Give me 24 hours to prepare. I'll be there." The soldier saluted and left. And Mara Knox walked into her workshop, opened the case containing her rifle, and began the familiar ritual. Because some things you carried forever. Not because you had to, but because when the world needed you, you answered. Always. Never underestimate the quiet ones who prepare in silence. When the impossible becomes necessary, they're the ones who step forward and deliver what everyone else thought couldn't be done.